It was their first Big Ten championship since 2004, which is a huge accomplishment. But now the college football playoff is right there, and they're number 2 in the final ranking that came out. And you could just tell how much it meant for them to get there. But in recapping the game, I'm not exactly sure how much there is to recap. Michigan 42, Iowa 3. I think this game was exactly what we anticipated it would be. Was Iowa's lack of ability to be creative on offense and to move the football. Michigan, of course, playing stout defense, and the creativity that they've displayed on offense these last few weeks really showed up. I mean, they had a couple of those gadget plays that they ran in there. Formationally, they displayed some things that they kind of had shown some wrinkles, but it became a bigger focal point. And really, I think they were trying to score some style points. And in my opinion, I believe they did. They had a strong case to be number 1 after that game.
Yeah, I made that statement. And I mean, it did, going back to what you were talking about, it did get ugly, like we said. I thought Kirk did the best job that he could do with a very limited roster, right? Like, hats off to that coaching staff and what they've done to get 10 wins with what they had. I mean, that's a hell of a job. Just what happens when you run into a much more talented team who, unlike the previous few years, has actually started to figure it out from a coaching standpoint and a rhythm and identity. And when you just run into a freaking stone wall, sometimes you got to take it in the chin and keep it moving. But I agree with you. I think Michigan showed a lot. And I said that on our national podcast after the game. I said, I think Michigan has an argument to be the number 1 team in the country. It obviously didn't work out that way. But they definitely have what I think is not a favorable matchup with Georgia. But
I mean, it's a winnable game
in terms of, but I think in terms of what the teams do well, it's a very evenly matched game from that standpoint. So I think you're going to see clashes of titans when it comes to great defense, a very physical style run game on offense, 2 quarterbacks who I think are limited, but understand the system, can operate within the system and make plays when asked to make plays. So they just match up really well. They're almost damn near mirror images of each other, with the exception of, I think, Georgia's defense. They slipped up once this year, but overall, I mean, put together a historic season. So I think they have a good draw and they have a chance to get there. So we'll see what happens. But there's a lot of arguments about this Michigan football team, and they've really come together. And we've talked about it, just being able to build throughout the year, build on the things they did well, get creative, add wrinkles, like you said, offensively. I think Josh did a great job of that throughout the year.
I agree.
And just riding with the war daddies who are making plays. So I'm excited about this Michigan team, and hopefully moving forward, they can keep things going for the next few years.
I'm with you on that. And you had mentioned about Iowa, and I just want to take time to talk about that program, because 10 wins is extremely good. And they were gritty. They made it up to kind of the top of the hill. And then they ran into a couple of weeks where it just was not going well for them. And they still found ways to win football games. Now, you mentioned it. You get to a game where a well-coached, very talented team comes in. This is what's going to happen to them. They're just so limited. But the fact that they were able to have the success that they did this year, I think really stands out. And you can look at specifically on the defense and special teams, the all-conference teams that came out. Iowa's got a bunch of guys on there, and they had, I think Riley Moss was the defensive back of the year, and he was a 2 or 3 star recruit coming out of high school. And that's what Iowa's known for, is developing guys and making sure that they rise above their level. So impressive there. But the story really is Michigan. And you hit on all the high points with them. Like, their offense has evolved in so many ways. And I think the players truly understand. And I'll get into that a little bit later as we talk about Josh Gaddis and the job that he's done. Defensively, that was a perfect game plan for them. They got a team behind, and they can make it a pass rush drill. And, that's exactly where they want to be. And so it'll be really unique as we get into this matchup, because I agree with you. I think that Georgia is a very, very good football team, but I think there are some matchups that you would say that you like Michigan in. And as we kind of talk about some of the bowls, we can get into that. But I wanted to lead into this question for you. because of the way that the Big Ten championship game went. And you can go back to when they first started doing the East and West. That was 2014, I believe, was the first year of that, where Ohio State won the Big Ten championship that year. And then the next year you had Michigan State, and then you had Penn State, and then Ohio State goes on a run of Big Ten championships. And then you get here and Michigan wins it. West team has not won it yet. They have not won it yet. And so it brings up this question of division realignment, where instead of doing East and West, do you maybe make it a North or South that could be more balanced? Or do you go back to this concept of leaders and legends, which people really didn't like, but you can make the argument that it was a more balanced way of conducting Big Ten football?
Yeah, I think it's tough because the storied programs, I think the argument for why they did it the way they did it is they didn't want to disrupt a bunch of rivalry games, which is a fair argument. But at the same time, really the pinnacle rivalry game is Ohio State and Michigan, and within the Big Ten. And then every other one, you talk about it, they mean a lot to the program, but I think there's creative ways to still get those games played.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it needs to be a year in, year out thing, because you do start seeing, even thinking back to when I was playing, Michigan State was a rival of ours, but I got up more for the Michigan and the Ohio State games, and those games, but the program feels it, the fan bases feel it, the kids in the locker room feel it. When someone's struggling and you're going into a rivalry game and you're playing well, or vice versa, it's not the same. I think it just is one of those things where as teams get rhythms throughout years and hit stretches of success, when you see that matchup, that's almost a rivalry game. So I think the Big Ten really needs to shift away from that and start focusing in on finding ways to distribute the talent. And there's a lot of issues, and you and I talked about it a little bit before we even hopped on here, just regionally, recruiting, the way everything's going, funding. There's a lot of issues that a lot of those teams in the West deal with, location. It's hard to get kids. And when you're competing in what would be like your bread and butter areas, you're also now competing against the Penn States, Ohio States, Michigan States of the world, because they can go in anywhere and start recruiting because of the success they've had. So you're really behind an 8 ball and you're fighting an uphill battle, and it's hard for them to overcome. And I think the North and South makes a lot of sense because you still keep that Michigan Ohio State game intact, and then you distribute a little bit with Penn State now. I guess you would put Penn State in the South, right?
Yeah,
kind of be the line right there.
Yep.
I think that would be very advantageous for Penn State to be able to put themselves in it at least every year. You got Maryland, I would assume Rutgers would probably be in the South. Iowa would be one that would be, one of those cyclical programs, but it puts a powerhouse in each one. So I think they could get creative with it. I think there's definitely a way to do it, but it does need to happen. The dominance is just, it's going to be hard then for the conference to really grow, because that's the East is just going to keep beating on each other.
I think also there's this interesting thought that if you are, let's say you get an Ohio State Michigan rematch, right? And Michigan were to lose that game, that there's this idea that you can be the SEC and get 2 teams in, because 100%. You had your best teams playing in Indianapolis. The other interesting thing is I think they went with this East and West idea originally because the Big Ten conference is seen as this conference that is coast to coast, where you start off in New York and you end up in the heartland of America. And so I think it's very representative of kind of the roots of the conference and the breadth and the vast nature of it. But if we're talking about competitive balance here, I think all options should be open.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. They have to get out of the sentimental value, and they really have to start thinking about, because to your point, had Ohio State and Michigan played again and you snuck both those teams into the college football playoff, now you're talking about, like you said, the ability to to put two teams and have two representatives, but also, I mean, think about the marketing and the money from TV deals and dollars from that standpoint too.
Yeah.
So it's more of an economical decision too. I think if you start thinking about it and the people making those decisions start thinking about it, you can really start making pushes, especially with the rise of the conference as a whole.
Right. And this is to say that there's never in this situation been a 2-loss team that has made the college football playoff, but it would be really hard to say that those two teams wouldn't be in that conversation of both making it in. But it's just something to think about.